Hi, welcome back. In the previous week sprint, I had implemented this Stair feature, and I was pretty happy with it. Closed off on the Friday session, and now I'm coming back to have a look on it. The idea here is, well, you need to do some testing. Now it's not coding, but the kind of testing is just pure like an implementation testing of the feature. So I went through and had a look on some other areas of the level, just trying to hunt down where I'm actually putting in stairs. And it appears that I need to put in a little bit more work. Now, this is a procedural system. So I know that when I had set the coordinates up for this specific feature, I had put the stairs too close to the core geometry, and it just needs to be moved back, or at least that's what I'm thinking is going to be the issue. And one of the things that's a core thing that I can see with the Stair feature that needs to be corrected. So before going in to the next sprint, doing any additional work on Geo, I want to make sure that these all line up correctly, so that I can then progress into the next sprint. Now, really, this is supposed to be week 2 or sprint 2, but no, I actually took a break last week because LinkedIn, they made this beautiful offer of giving away a free month on their training boards. So they actually acquired Linda, which was an independent company that used to rival companies like Digital Tutors, which was sold on to Pural's site. And I was like, I don't even know what kind of content was on lynda.com, because I primarily stuck with Digital Tutors back in the day before going over to Pural's site. But as somebody who used to go into places like Waterstones, Dillon's, Borders, like 10 years ago before they all got shut down because of the financial crisis, I was like, no, that's free knowledge. So I took the whole week off to try and get my hands on some of their training, and I think roughly maybe about 150 courses, which is great, so at some point they'll be taking that away and it'll be something like £56 a month. But for me, knowledge is something to be treasured, especially when you're coming from a background where you used to have to buy books for like £50 each, back in the day as a software engineer. So you could be going in, to these bookshops every month, spending like 250 quid. So the idea of being able to access even one training course, quality course, for zero, I had to take advantage of that. So that's why we're in another week. So I've missed off a week essentially from doing any engineering or any design or modeling or anything like that. So the only thing I can see that I want to clear up before going into another sprint is making sure that I can, making sure that when I'm reviewing the Stairs feature, it works, right? So that's what I'm going to be doing today. And then once I get all the stairs placed as they're supposed to be, and getting them functional, then we can look about officially going into sprint 2. All right, so that's it for now. I'll keep you posted, and let's get into it. Okay, welcome back. What are we doing then? What are we actually going to be doing in terms of this quote-unquote investigation? So there's the stairs. I know that this specific one works because I isolated this one on level 1 and got that feature working just fine. So I've stopped the execution of the processor, the SOP processor, at this specific point where it's just trying to highlight the points that need to be blown away, right? And one of the things that I observed was that I had a stairs on level 2, which wasn't doing that, right? And I need to investigate why that is. So the stairs is, in terms of an approximation to the core geometry, where it needs to be, but it's not isolating the points that need to get blown away. The railings, they appear to be working as expected, at least for what I've seen so far. This stair feature, probably it needs to be pulled out a bit, but yeah, the same issue that I had when I was actually doing the development. So this is just going to be a case of making sure that the translation for the feature, the stairs feature, it just gets pulled back along this axis here, which hopefully that should be fine. The real question though is, what is the impact of that change? Because if you notice, this stair has identified the wall points that need to be blown away, whereas this one hasn't, and it is near enough in terms of an approximation to the wall that it should have done. So I'm going to need to do some investigation into that, and hopefully be able to isolate what the issue is. Now again, this is a procedural system. Notice it's in a similar proximity to the others. It's been able to isolate the points. So yeah, is this a quick win? It's a bit difficult to tell at this stage. So all this geometry and the way it's been laid out, this is all test geo, right? So I can blow this away and have this recreated in a reasonable amount of time. We're talking maybe less than an hour to make additional levels, because of just the power of Houdini and how the instances is configured. But you know, you want to be able to prove that you can have, you know, a lower level, higher level, different levels, as it were, and that's why so much effort has gone into doing this. Because, you know, if you need to rework something, or if you need to change these pillars, I can change all of the corner point pillars with minimal hassle. Like, it's as simple as changing the geo that it's being pointed at, and voila, it's got a new location, and then you can send it across via PDG or HDA into Unity or Unreal. Which again gives you the benefit of being able to automate like that, so you can actually spend time getting features like this corrected. So rather than me going into so much detail as to why it is that I'm doing what I'm doing right now, I better do some work. So I want to pause here and start this investigation, and hopefully this will be a quick win. There's some things I'm noticing that you know, realistically shouldn't be an issue, and it is. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, we're back. So what have I found so far? Okay, so you see it says stair curve 3 here. This is like, how can I describe this? Each SOP has its own instance, right? So say for example, if I was to just willy-nilly copy this on over here, this, to a certain degree, this copy that I've made, which is being generated and doing all of this calculation down here, essentially will give me a stair curves 4, right? Which I can come in here and I can make changes to this, but they won't be automatically reflected in this specific SOP, right? So within the core loop, when generating all of this geo, I've got the features as I wanted them, but what that means now is I need to now go through every location within the workflow that uses one of these instances and make sure that the changes that I made have been implemented at that location. Now that sounds like a bit of gibberish, so just to put it into better perspective, right? Let's say that the first copy, which is the master copy, right? And I make the changes there and I'm happy with those changes. And in that location, I would have had stair curves output 1, output 2, so on and so forth, right? It means then that if I have output 7 or 8, I need to go and make sure that that additional feature is replicated to the rest of the SOP, which is easy enough to do. So I've done that already for this one, which would be right click and then match current definition, and then allow editing, right? But then what I then have is this additional output, but it's not being replicated. It's not being brought into the workflow, which is why it wasn't behaving as the others were, which I'm about to do that now. And hopefully that will solve the problem. So we're gonna drop down a null. See, I'm saying that like, hey, this is supposed to be so easy and it's just supposed to work. No, doesn't work like that. All right. So now whatever processing is supposed to take place based on this being available should be implemented within the workflow. But I'm just gonna take an extra couple of seconds and make sure that, you know, naming conventions and whatever color code I was previously using has been replicated correctly. So that's one. Probably have some kind of a light green going on there. I'll need to do that for that one. But right now, while we've got the train of thought moving, let's just carry it on for the rest. So notice I have 5 outputs here. I'm going to match the current definition. I'll do a bit of calculation down the bottom, and there's my additional output, and it's got a lock on it, so I'm going to make sure I leave that as allowing the edit to go through. Put down a null. All right, color code it. Now it doesn't have to be placed anywhere, but just to keep it kind of organized. So what actually is taking place here now is here we have this concept of points here, vertices here. So I'll just hover over each one. Points, vertices, primitives, and detail. All right. Detail takes place once based on how you implement it. Primitives, that's going to be like a quad or a triangle. Points or vertices, you know, vertices are, you know, points are, right? So within those workflows, all of this here, I'm taking through different stuff. So let's go back up for a second, because I'm already highlighting the specific stairs, and see whether or not I can highlight this specific bit, maybe, depending on whether or not the translation takes place. No, the translation doesn't take place until the main workflow, so no point in trying to demo that. All right, let's carry on. All right, so we've implemented that one, and now we're going to implement this one, match the current definition. We've got the extra node, so it's just taking in the functionality again. Bit of hiccup there. Allow editing, and then let's just drop down a null. And now it is rather interesting that I was able to visualize some of the feature on other locations. Not sure why that was. Rather interesting. But yeah. Now let's go ahead and see whether or not these changes that we've made any difference to the rest of the workflow. So I'm just going to pause here for a second and look to isolate that bit of code. Okay, how do they look further up? And while the point, the additional output was missing upstream, I can see that there is an additional issue here. The specific point that needs to be translated up to find the point that for the door area, it's supposed to be right here, is way off here in the distance. Now that's not supposed to happen, and so I'm just going to quickly drill a bit further in order to determine why it is that this which is supposed to be here or further here, is way off in the distance here, and that's only happening for this specific stair. So yeah, I'm not sure how long that's going to take to find that, because it's the same logic all the way through. But this is just part and parcel of what we have to do. So yeah, I'm going to pause here and continue drilling. Okay, what have we found? When setting up the translation for the stairs, you know, what is its transformation and its rotation? I had this shifted out by an extra 2 units. If I put in here 92, you're going to find that the wall is going to be missing, right? So it's just going to be a case of needing to spend a bit of time finessing this to get it to where I want it to be, because I know that even though I can easily say do a transform on the steer by you know, and two less on the x-axis, but notice what's happened now is that the steer itself has now gone through the geo. Now, is that because of its specific orientation? Let me see for a second, and I'm pretty sure that's not it, because I do have additional steer geo that's on the same orientation, and it's not giving me that kind of trouble. So that tells me that there is something that I'm missing, and it's not as straightforward as what I'm thinking. It's whatever it is going to be. It's something that's going to require a very strategic strike. It shouldn't be something that's going to require additional features or anything like that. So right, so if I come down here for a second, all right, so this part of the routine, there it is. So the finder, or the point that needs to be placed, needs to be out here. And what's not clear is, if it works fine for that one, if I come down here, this one doesn't have that problem. And that's what, without me making any specific coordinate changing or orientation changes for this area here. Now clearly I'll still need to move the steer geometry out, but why is that causing problems? Okay, so we're gonna pause. No need in having you over the shoulder while I'm looking or investigating for this specific feature, but that's where we are so far. It's good that we've updated the subnets to incorporate the logic, but the idea here is that we've already worked on this, and it should be as straightforward as placing it with the offset. Okay, that's interesting. Right, what does that mean? Let's look at another part of the geo for a second. Let's switch this off. Okay. Right. I'm pretty sure I put an offset in here, but that would have been an offset probably, if I can see this looks like the x-axis. So I probably have an offset that's going in, but if it's going in on the x-axis and only shooting in taking one specific axis into account, so if I'm only saying just a straightforward plus x or positive x shift, well, that's not going to be good for the others, because that's going to drag them in the wrong direction. So I will need to know what the orientation is for the steers in order to be able to make the adjustment along the axis, which not very complicated, not complicated at all, just more the whole idea as to where that needs to go in. So we're going to pause here. I'm going to go and test that theory, and if it works, that's going to be it for this specific feature. Okay, check back in a couple of minutes. Okay, and we are back, and it looks like my hunch is about the orientation, having the single parameter going in is not going to be sufficient for what this is, and here is why. One, I do points for the geo, right? So that was a big thing, moving from having polygons shift across into Unity, and now taking that to points, right? So we then have the prefab set up within Unity, and then we can send points across, and it's all really great, and I like it, right? But this is a point that relates to the workflow, and while this -1 here, being the staircase platform offset, is a -1, well, if I'm going in that direction for the stair orientation, it's going to be dragging it in the wrong direction. And on this end here, let's just get our bearings right. Where is that other stair? All right, boom. I'm trying to find, yeah, so this is the one over here. So this is in the -x, from what I can see. So that way would be going that way, should be +x. So this way is a -x. So this works perfectly in favor of this specific stair, which is what got implemented as the feature last week. But if I go and make that +1 on that x-axis, you're going to find that this pushes back that way. And we just wait for it to do a calculation and update all the geometry. Shouldn't take a second. But while it's doing that, the viewport is now frozen because it's doing its calculations. That's only just going to take a second, all right? So there you go. It's now shift that back in the x-axis. But when I come back over to the other stairs that's using the exact same workflow, here we go. That's shifted it in the opposite direction. So what I need to do is take this specific parameter out of the mix and make it relative to the stair, and make sure that then the stair then has some way of figuring out which axis it's working on. Because if that's not working fine here, what's the implementation on this one? Hey, it matches up perfectly. So it's based on axis. And as long as I get the axis right and I know which orientation I need to set that up as, it should just flow. So that's going to take me, blah, blah, blah. I'm not even going to quote a time frame. But I know what's wrong with it and what I need to do now. And this is one of the fun things about working with these tools. It forces you to think, just like you do if you're writing, traditional corporate software, right? But obviously, if you had a development manager over you while you were doing this, that wouldn't be fun, because you'd have said, yes, I've hit the target, and then you send it over to testing, and we didn't take into account that the different orientations going to work differently based on that offset value. So yeah, let's pause things for a moment while I implement this change, and then we'll kick things off again. All right. Where are we going to find this routine? Let's close down the parameter interface. Now, if I recall, it was a couple of weeks ago now, or at least a week and a half, I do something with parameter, pardon, right, param staircase platform offset, right, which is what we were just looking on. So I need to do an implementation that is specific to the component right about here. So parameters, new Pretty sure it's here. We got the parameters. Right. So my steer transformation and my steer rotation is fine. I just need to make a relative steer offset. Okay, because of the importance of the change that we're going to go in with here now, I'm going to pause this video, because if I make the wrong change here, I'm gonna pay for it. So let's just pause this right now, and once I've implemented the feature now and tested it, I'll start back up. Don't want to make a mistake on this, so let's just pause here. And we are back. Right. So after making the necessary changes to the parameters and setting the values, I've done some quick testing, and the change that has gone in with the steer active offset, making it relative to the actual steer itself, so far it appears to be working. Right, so this is level 4 steer, and that's being oriented correctly. I'm not currently testing whether or not the blast point works, because in theory they should. There's no reason for them not to. I don't want to jinx myself, but there we go. So level 1, and those are on opposite sides of the x-axis, and yeah, the change appears to be functioning as we're required. So it's saying that. Let's see whether or not that actually does work with the blast points, because that's a real thing. It's making sure that a few things take place. The collision geo gets generated correctly, and yeah, so let's just quickly do that there. All right, so here you see that we place a series of, let's call them group boxes, that are going to go hunting for the entry points that needs to be removed, right? So there's the top of the stairs, there's the bottom of the stairs, there's railings going across, a couple of them out there in the distance, right? So with that being placed at those locations, if we go for full execution, what do we get? Let's source one. That one down there is opened. Those two even. Right. Now this is testing, so if it's painful, that's just, you know, this is what you got to do. You want to know that when you release something, you're not going to get any terrible reviews. All right. Right, and level 2, yeah. Level 3, and if we go hunting, and level 4, right? So if at 1,000 levels, as we're laying them down, the steer feature should function as we require. So that's it for this session here. Now it's not so much of a sprint as opposed to just, you know, testing. How I went about implementing this specific change, I don't think I should mention that, but just quite quickly while we're still on this area here, I had a separate transform up here which I don't need anymore, so I'm just going to delete that one there. It's just going to calculate and do its thing. Eventually, and we're back. I just got rid of that node, and on this specific transform we have a kind of expression or a macro. If I just go ahead and edit that, and what we're saying here is find the parameter from the control, take the parent iteration because we're in a nested loop, and then take the local iteration for the local part of the loop, concatenate them and make this string, and then evaluate them, right? And that's where we're getting this specific value. So each level has its own index, and on each index you could have 1 or 2 or 3, as many stairs as you like, and then essentially you're trying to figure out what the offset value is from that specific control. And then if I go up to the top here, there's control 1, and there is the actual parameter that we're after. So each one of these is going to have its own randomly, well, yeah, you could say partially random name, right? They're not going to have the same name, and all we're doing is trying to figure out what that is and grab this specific value. So before I only had one parameter at a higher level, which did serve its purpose during testing, but like right now I don't need that at all, right? So here under the stair configuration, I had just a single value, and using it for all instances was just wrong. So right now I can really just get rid of that actually. So we go into the parameter interface and we go hunting for the offsets. So there's a staircase parameter offset, and I shouldn't be using that anywhere else. So I should be able to just delete that parameter and accept those changes. Yeah. Let it do its thing, and we should be done. Right, so thanks for watching. It's been an interesting video, this one. It's just, you know, these devlogs, the purpose of them, you know, you're working in isolation, you're working remotely, and to kind of keep yourself motivated and also keep you on target, you're having these videos where you're telling the entire world this is what you're gonna do. You're probably gonna keep yourself focused because you got that kind of pressure saying, hey, you said you were going to get that thing done. So similar to a Scrum, if you're doing like, you know, Agile in the office, just with the benefit of having your own fridge and microwave. Right. All right. Thanks for watching. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.